"You see that?" he asked Theo. "If they were upside down, I'd be impressed." Seth laughed and did a half backflip, landing on his hands, west-facing himself now. His own vision was undisturbed. The world itself no more seemed upside down than when he tipped his head back to see westward, but his arms were blocking Theo's view, and the thought of trying to maneuver them out of the way made him fear he'd lose his balance, risking a dangerous, uncontrolled fall. He hadn't hand-walked since he was a kid. It had seemed easy then, but he was seriously out of practice. He completed the flip and brushed the soil from his palms. "What are they doing?" Elena asked irritably. "Nothing's happening." "The hardest part is getting the wheels moving," Seth's father explained. "But once they start, the museum began to turn." It stretched out along the grand avenue that cut diagonally across the city, growing ever more slender, taking up ever less of the width of the road. The center of the building, the pivot, stayed fixed, while the opposing teams of movers ran ahead of their rope's anchor points, half of them heading northeast, half southwest. "See anything now?" Irina asked sarcastically. Elena said nothing, but when Seth glanced her way she seemed rapt. "Are you sure you don't want to be a mover?" Theo teased him. Seth could feel his own face contorted into an expression of delighted stupefaction. The parallelogram below them was insanely skinny now. He'd turned pebbles about as far as this, but nothing larger. "Only if I get to ride inside the buildings and see all the rooms remain normal while the city turns around me." "You can always turn yourself and get the same view." "You think so? Who's going to clear the streets for me?" The museum's far corner, needle-thin, slid past the bakery, the grain store, the bathhouse. It crossed the bridge over the brook and pushed on into the northern residential precinct. The movers themselves were barely visible now, stretched out along the road into surreal slivers of flesh. Despite what he'd said to Theo's father, Seth doubted that their siders were feeling bored. Strength and agility were not the only skills at play here. To execute a maneuver like this, you'd need the clearest possible sense of your surroundings in all directions, demanding a flawless collaboration between walker and sider. The corner itself became too narrow to discern, but then Seth noticed some of the movers reorienting their bodies and heading back down the avenue. They'd turned the massive building as far as they needed for the first step, so now the central pivot would be raised and a new one, almost at the corner, lowered, as the wheels were reconfigured to facilitate a counter-turn that would end with the museum 1/8 of the way to its destination. It would take the whole day to bring it to its new location at the city's southern edge. Seth's father handed out the stone fruit he'd brought, and everyone sat on the dusty ground of the abandoned lot, chewing the sweet, heavy pulp, while they waited for the second act to start. Theo said, "We should halt the sun, not move the cities." His mother laughed. "One day, maybe. I'm serious." Seth's mother tipped her head back and scowled, unable to resist taking Theo at his word. "And survive on what? Do you think you could farm the same plots of land forever?" "And what about the quarries?" Seth added. "Whatever happened with the crops, you couldn't dig up the same stone twice." "How much new stone would we actually need?" Theo countered, "if we weren't leaving a trail of rubble behind." Seth paused to give the question due consideration. Theo had a habit of blurting out these absurd, dreamlike propositions and then defending them with such sincerity that everyone's skepticism began to waver. "And how exactly do we halt the sun?" Theo's father asked. "There's a mover for every job, isn't there?" Theo replied. "So surely there's an unmover for this one." This assertion was so strange that it hung in the air unchallenged. Seth looked down across the city. Much as he admired the movers, the truth was that the best he